Go.
And
This is a tip from Gilbert. Yeah, aquí está. Yeah. It's recording it for me.
muestra la pantalla, por favor.
One moment. Yes, I will. One moment. Settings.
Espera, un momento. ¿En cuál settings?
Ahí abajo en la pantalla. No, en la mitad del StreamYard.
Settings
Y
del
se va
stream.
con settings.
No lo veo.
All right, Houston, you got me, Gilbert Garcia, with another tip for me,
Settings.
talk, inspiration, and prayer. So thank you very much for joining us. And as Ed Sullivan says, we're going to have a really big show. We're going to have a really good show. And I'll tell you, this is really probably one of the most important shows that we've had, certainly all year. And I've got a guest of mine who happens to be a good friend of mine, and that is Miss Rachel Fischer. But really, you probably have seen her or heard her talk somewhere in the Houston area. Actually, she's all over the country. She's written books, and she talks about sex trafficking. So, Rachel, welcome to the show. I want to first talk about, I have a prayer for sex trafficking victims.
¿Cómo?
And I want to talk a little bit about your bio, because your bio is like, 10 pages long. And when I think of you, I'm not so sure if I think of you as a nurse, or I think of you as a lawyer, or I think of you as a therapist, or I think of you as an expert witness, but you're really kind of all the above. And if anyone has any questions about sex trafficking, they always turn to you. What do you think of yourself?
It's hard to say. I mean, that's a lot of titles. I'm definitely not an attorney.
But you're all of those.
I do work in all those realms.
Yes.
And it's a collaborative effort, right? We need the attorneys, we need the therapists. When the victims go from victims to survivor, it takes a village to get them to that point. And so that whole collaborative model is who I work with. And being a survivor myself, I came from it, and I bring my lived experience and that knowledge of living it to the field of expertise through being a forensic nurse, through being an expert witness, working with attorneys.
Okay, when people talk about sex trafficking, of course they think about, or at least I think some people think about, or at least I think about, the whole stereotype of Bissonnette, right? And activity there. But then you see movies like Taken, and I don't know if that's Hollywood or not, but the Albanians and Good Luck. I don't really know, but you see all this. What is sex trafficking? If you had to define it, what is it?
So sex trafficking, most people have seen Taken, but
Yep.
many have seen The Sound of Freedom, and they see that. Can it happen that way? Yes, it can. But at its simplest, it's not smuggling. It's not just moving people across the border. It's utilizing somebody with sex trafficking. It's utilizing them for sexual gain, giving them money, a place to live, survival. And you're taking them either across state lines or from their high school back to their home to a hotel. But it's somebody benefiting off of selling another person for sexual benefit.
That's just terrible when you think about it. That's just terrible. And, you see it all the time, and you see it from every angle. Let me ask you this. This is going to be a loaded question, but I don't mean it to be. Are things getting better? I mean, if you go back, I'm making it up, 10 years or back in the day when you were young, are things better? Are people more aware, or is it really the same?
I wouldn't say the same. I would say it looks different. It's growing.
Okay, let's talk
as
about that.
Technology grows, right? So you can have Bissonnette where, and what he means by that is there's a road, it's called the Blade or the Track, any area in Houston. For those who don't know that prostitution is out there, they think it's prostitution. They don't understand it's really trafficking going on. But that's one road in the city. It happens in hotels. It happens in homes. It happens all over. In Houston, Harris County, it happens everywhere here. We're a hub for it. But it's not that it's getting better or worse. It's just changing. They're going onto online platforms. They're going into the schools. They're sending kids into youth groups, into churches, infiltrating where our kids are. And the average age is about 14 years old.
The average age of a sex trafficking victim is 14 years old?
Yes.
That's horrible.
It's terrible.
I think about my daughter. She's 18. She would be in the life 4 years. That's terrible.
Yeah. And what you just said, Gilbert, is key. You said the life, right? So victims of trafficking, you see these signs, are you a victim of human trafficking? Call this number.
Mm-hmm.
The city, the airports, everybody's picking up on it. So that the prevention awareness is getting better. But we have to listen to survivors who've lived it to know what it's going to take to truly help them. To have a sign that says, are you a victim of trafficking? Call this number. I didn't know when I was in it what's going on. The girls on Bissonnette don't know what trafficking is. The average civilian doesn't know what trafficking is. So if you said, are you tired of having sex for money and having to give somebody else your money? Call this number. There's better for you. Are you tired of having to work and not getting paid for it? That's labor trafficking. Call us. But we have to put things in what they understand. Like you said, the life. They call it, we're in the life. We're in the game. They don't say, I'm a human trafficking victim. So we have to speak their language and understand what they're going through to truly help them.
That's very interesting. We have a caller already. Let's just see who this person is. Is there a Mark on the line? Mark, are you there?
Good. Yeah, good morning. How y'all doing? Y'all doing all right this morning?
Mark, we're doing great. I have Miss Rachel Fischer, who is really a sex trafficking. Well, you are a survivor, but you're also way more than that. You really are a beacon of hope for so many people out there. What do you got for us there, my friend?
You know what? I'm glad. Yeah, and she explained what sex trafficking is, and what I want to go back is called corruption. I want to go back. Remember back in the days when the congressman was messing with them cowgirls,
yep,
and they swept everything up under the rug. They did everything. Remember when Barack Obama's Secret Service men was paying women to come to the room? See, all this what they doing it. Congress, everybody, they doing it. Everybody should be held accountable for these type of crimes. And as long as they keep sweeping it under the rug and keep going down to where we at, I mean, what is it? I mean, you just go after certain individuals that you want to go after, but those guys should be held accountable, but they sweep a lot of things like that under the rug. And I'm glad you said it's about sex trafficking, it's about paying for money.
Well,
and they got caught up in that.
Stay with me, Mark. Don't go. I want to come back to you, but let's ask this: is there a double standard with the I don't know the right term for the Johns? Is there a double standard?
So that's an interesting question. Great point, Mark. So it's supply and demand, right? The girls, the victims, because it's boys and girls, but that's the supply. The demand is the men who are predominantly buying sex. Women do it as well, but the demand are these corporate leaders that are bringing in girls to their suite, taking them to dinners, and then they're entertaining their clients with a girl. Here, rent a car, have a girl come with it. That's prevalent in Houston, these exotic cars. But it's the men who are buying and paying for it. That's the demand. And if we don't stop the demand and hold them accountable, which is where when I work with attorneys and testify as an expert in trial, it's to hold the buyers accountable. And buying sex is a felony in Texas now. So that was huge legislative wise, but we have to hold the buyers accountable, because if there's nothing, you can go get, there's a saying in life, we don't chase them, we replace them. We can recover 10 girls and bring them back to their parents, but they're just going to go to the next high school, get 10 more, and the men are going to keep buying. And if we don't stop the men, then it's never going to stop. We have to hold them accountable.
Very interesting. What say you there, Mark? It sounds like there is a double standard, or maybe there's just not enough accountability, period, in the whole system.
Yeah, it's a definite double standard, but we should hold those people accountable. But all of a sudden, they like to seal their documents and cover it up so we can't see the names, so we can vote them up out of there, the mess they doing. So that's called corruption. And as long as corruption is at the top of the level, the people who make the laws and the rules, then this is what we're going to be going after. You see what I'm saying? So at the end of the day, they should be held accountable.
Well, let me ask you this. Hold it. Stay with me, Mark.
Okay.
Stay with me. So then, Rachel, let me go another direction from Mark here, which is how much of it is just an old-fashioned, and if I use offensive terms out there in the radio world, you got to use offensive language to talk about this because it's real. So are there just these individual pimps that have, the victims that they utilize and exploit? Or is it really organized crime where there's, you know, a whole, I don't know, syndicate of people that are doing this with a big organization? I mean, what's really the stereotype? What's the most prevalent thing?
Organized crime is definitely prevalent with cartels, the RICO, the federal level. There's definitely that organized crime element, but it's also a local 18-year-old, 17-year-old at a high school, males or females, that are pimping out the junior hires, the 9-year.
Is that right?
That's prevalent here. That's what's happening locally. It is definitely organized at the higher level, the high level escorts, and people think it's prostitution, right? And so a big thing to understand here is prostitution and trafficking are two different things. And with prostitution, these women are not prostitutes. There's a stigma around the victims because people are like, oh, they're just prostitutes and my husband's cheating on me. And that's what people in Houston, all around America, think, is that these are just girls who are taking their husbands. But the reality is these are victims who have been lured, coerced into this life. And so you have to look at, these women are not prostitutes. They're in prostitution, or they're being prostituted. There's a difference.
I see.
And then when you're forced to do something, the elements of force, fraud, or coercion come in if it's an adult that you have to prove. If it's a child, you're not allowed to sell a child for sex and gain from them. But the adults, I mean, if no little girl grew up and said, I want to sell my body for sex and work at the strip club, they want to be ballerinas. So you have to look at, how did that girl get there and why? Instead of having a bias and disgusted with them, say, who hurt them? What do you need and why?
Wow. Mark, what say you, pal?
I don't want to say this here. We got a president that is convicted of 34 counts, and he was involved in what we're talking about right now. So these top leaders and all these folks, they got all this money and power. This is what it's about. We have to try to bring it down, because the word corruption is just so corrupt. It's ridiculous. The whole Supreme Court, everything is just corrupt. Everybody just corrupt. But when the little people get charged for the crime, we held accountable. But when they get caught, they want to cover it up, wrap it up, shut it down, find crack cocaine in the White House, and don't do no more investigation. We don't want to find out who brought it in there. This is what they do. So, hey, it's called corruption. But we got to somehow vote them all out and get them out and put the right people in there. That's all I'm trying to say.
Well, we appreciate you calling in, Mark. Thank you. Call in again. So let's come back to that. So one thing that you struck me was somehow people in high school, are they so clever, these organizations? Clever is such an unfair word, because that implies something positive. And I don't mean to be clever as in positive. I mean dastardly. I mean so bad that they're really getting young people to go into the middle school and high school to find the next, the next victims. That's what's going on. That's what's going on.
They target vulnerabilities. And with social media, you've got dating sites, you've got Snapchat, Facebook, normal sites that everyone's on, and they target these victims. They look at what they're posting and they say, oh, you have a dad who makes a lot of money. Well, he's never home, is he? He's not at your cheer practice. I'll come be your cheerleader. I'll come pick you up. I'll take you to the Galleria. And so you have a 14-year-old girl with daddy issues because her dad's so wealthy and never home. And somebody comes in and says, I'll take care of you. Come hang with me. And then they say, bring a friend, bring a friend. Then they get them addicted to drugs. They take them to a party. They take them shopping. They spoil them. And then they end up addicted to drugs. And these girls, the grades start failing. They start having new friends the mom doesn't know anything about. And then they end up a runaway, which is a missing child, right? And then they're running to these criminal organizations, going to bottle service, going to Vegas, flying on private jets. I mean, it's high level and it's low level, but they target a vulnerability. What are you missing and what can we fulfill that daddy issue? So then when we get to law enforcement level, we look in their phones when we recover them, and who's saved as daddy in their phone? Because it's probably not their father.
No kidding. Well, you hear about, some of these celebrities and the whole wilding or whatever not wilding. What do they call it when they're having these crazy parties with all this stuff involved? Does that surprise you? Or are you thinking to yourself, boy, it's about time that we know about these things, because you've always known about it?
It's been in the dark and it's coming to light, and it is getting covered up. There's a lot that's being swept under the rug, but I hope that with the current cases that everyone knows about, that people start realizing that it's not just celebrities. It's not just, on media, but it's in your back door. Like, it's in your backyard, it's in your neighborhoods, it's everywhere. It doesn't always look that glamorous. It can be a simple thing and it starts small, but it's in your schools, it's in your communities everywhere across Houston. Street Grace is a nonprofit that I worked with, and
say it again. Street what?
Street Grace.
Okay.
So it's
Street Grace.
Yeah, it's an organization that I volunteer with, and they've got chatbots that actually go in and intercept messages that predators are talking to try to buy children. And they've got tens of thousands that they've intercepted just in this area, just going in and trying to deter these buyers from children.
Wow.
And
how do you intercept the message? What's a chat box mean? What does that
so
mean?
a chat bot, it takes over messaging. So if a guy goes on and tries to talk to a kid and find out their address, and the kids give them their addresses, their parents'
Because
schedule.
they're just innocent, and they're like, oh,
Mhm.
sure, I live here.
Oh, yeah. I mean, we as adults do clickbait. We click the toll pass, and we think we get scammed. We get phishing emails, and if we fall for it, kids fall for it. So
Interesting.
So this is a chatbot that starts taking over the messages. It intercepts them, and so we're getting data about how many kids are being targeted and what information they're giving. And so it's a good tool to use with law enforcement to be able to find these predators. But the numbers are devastating to see how many men are interested in little kids in Houston alone.
God, I just want to scream when I hear that, especially when I think of, I had young boys, I had young daughter, and my daughter still is young. And to think that she could be a victim. Hold that thought. We have another caller there. That's Dominic. I think he was here earlier. Dominic, are you there?
Yes, Gil. You and
I'm with Rachel Fischer talking about sex trafficking here, just in general, the phenomenon of it. And we're trying to set the record straight for Houston.
Let me close this door here because
you don't want anybody to hear. Go ahead, Dominic. Tell us.
No. I'm closing the door so that the noise on the computer screen doesn't come through. Okay, my thing is this as trafficking. You need to really get this thing in the bud. And since this is Afro-American History Month, Black History Month, why aren't we calling this sexual slavery? Why don't we just call it that? You're using a person for money. To me, that's a violation of the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendment of the Constitution. Why don't we just call it sexual slavery, put a bigger bad word on it? And I think that might help. If you are trafficking a person, you are a slaver. I think that would hit home a lot better than just trying to use fancy, colorful words. Second of all, you said Bissonnette. It hit me. The Bissonnette route, the 65 Bissonnette on Metro, is one of the busiest routes in the city. It's a bus every 15 minutes. That was part of New Bus Network. Gil was part of. Thank you, Gil. Of course, I was part of it too. But anyway, has your organization reached out to the new Metro police chief? He's been very proactive with me. I see a problem, I text him, and it gets solved. And I think that might be the thing, is to put stuff on the buses, announcements, work with the drivers that, hey, or, you have information in the bus or something. Somebody gets on the bus, there is help out there. And that might just be the one time this person's away from everything, gets that message, and calls for help. Well, with that, I have no other comments.
Yeah, hold on. Dominic, hang on. So let me go through that for a second. I want to unwrap a lot of things you just said. First of all, this concept is, would it matter if we use more accurate language?
Absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, just to tell it like it is, that these people are sex slaves, and they're kind of like, what slave owners would use some of their slaves for. I mean, it's kind of like the same thing. Right? Am I right or am I wrong?
It's modern day slavery, and it is titled as that, modern day slavery. There's more slaves now than at any time in history. And it's a multi-billion-dollar organization. They can make up to $500,000 a year on one girl. And with cocaine, you can sell it once it's gone. With a girl, you can sell her 10 times a day and make a lot of money. So there's a lot of money in this industry.
Wow. That's so disheartening. Well, if we use more accurate language, I think that's probably at least one way to get it out there. Number two is, how are you coordinating with law enforcement?
We do a lot of training with law enforcement on how to build rapport with victims, because a lot of times they're they're never just going to go to the police and say, I need help, I have a trafficker, because a lot of times they're in love with their trafficker. It's this trauma bonding relationship. It's their protector, somebody who's offering them housing and stability. And yeah, they have to go make money for them, but they have stability. And so it's a weird concept to think about, but we do work with law enforcement and help them to better, because they were like, well, we're going to arrest prostitutes. We've gotten better law enforcement wise. And, Harris County Sheriff's Office, HPD, the Vice Division, they're doing a great job and they've come a long way. And we've got HATRA, the Human Trafficking Rescue Alliance, working with all the agencies to do a collaborative effort on how to help and hold Johns accountable. But it comes down to, they can't just ask for help. They can't just call. They have phones that are being monitored by their traffickers. They can't just call. And if they don't know where to go to, and even if they do call for help, the resources are limited on where are they going to stay? Where are they going to eat? Where are they going to work?
Yeah, so in other words, if they get out of the life, what do they do now?
Correct.
And are a lot of them addicted to drugs?
Yes.
And so then all of a sudden there's that issue too, which is detoxing.
Huge.
Wow. Go ahead there, Dominic. Go.
Yeah, one other thing I'm going to say. I'm going to see the nuclear chief at Metro. I'm going to ask him about this situation, particularly along the 65. With that, I'm sending it back to you.
Very good, very good. I think we have another caller already. Before we go to another topic, and I want to go to my prayer. Let's see who this person was. Was there a Vicky there? Vicky. Miss Vicky. Of course, Houston, you're on with me, Gilbert Garcia. A tip from me with Miss Rachel Fischer, who's really an extraordinary human being. Vicky, are you there?
Hey. Yep, Dr. Cruz here.
Dr. Cruz, you got Miss Rachel Fischer. I don't know if y'all know each other yet. You probably do, but we're talking about sex trafficking.
Love it. Ray, I am so glad to hear what you're doing. I worked in the school district for a short time. I came out of working different projects in corporate, but got into the school district and saw the nightmare that's happening with human trafficking. It's real. And I'm not sure if you heard of our program, but it's called HERO. Gilbert's a huge supporter of it, but we do go to the schools and talk about the abuse and talk about human trafficking. And I think it's so important that we educate the children to kind of just be each other's keepers, to understand what's really going on, because it's all true and it's real, Gilbert, in the schools. I mean, I've seen where little girls, and it's crazy because there's some parents that even that know and that are aware of the human trafficking, but because it's a source of income, it's permissible.
That's so horrible. I can't even fathom that. That if you know about it and you're looking the other way.
Correct. And I think that it's a matter of educating all students. I've been out it's a major issue. And we want to partner with you, Rachel. If there's anything we can do with HERO, we teach our children how to be helpful, encouraging, respectful, on task. And Gilbert, just here recently this week, we picked on 2 apartments with 1,400 children. One is in the East End. We have 1,400 kids, and Milby is going in, these children that we're coaching for leadership to teach. So that's what we do, Rachel. We teach how to be helpful, encouraging, respectful, on task. And we also have a leadership program for students now that will basically teach these models inside the schools.
That is so great. Miss Vicky, that is so great. Dr. Cruz. Well, let me ask you this, Rachel. So when you think about it, where does it end? Do you ever feel overwhelmed? Like, there's so many and there's just so many. What keeps you going? Because you're always upbeat whenever I see you and you're talking everywhere and you never give up. But sometimes you just say, it's one step forward, 2 steps back.
It's overwhelming. It's definitely exhausting.
Exhausting. That's a better word.
Yeah, I've done so many recoveries. I don't say rescue because they don't always want to be rescued. Their life in the street is better than their life familial trafficking and being at home. So doing the recoveries is exhausting. Putting them in a safe home, getting them detox is a lot of money. It's exhausting. And so my heart beats for the demand. How do we stop it before it starts?
Okay.
The prevention, right? Because we're all going to get burnout if we don't stop the problem. Just recovering them and rehabilitating them is not going to stop. We have to focus on the demand and stop the men from buying, and educate the communities, educate the churches and the men on what is this and what are you doing when you go get the massage and the happy ending? What is happening when you go on to the dating site and you order a school-age child with a plaid skirt? So if the demand stops, our job's going to get a lot easier. It's frustrating to see it continue to perpetuate. And then you see the recent arrests and the cases of, child pornography and child sex assault, and it all ties together. It's that sexual deviant behavior that drives people to want to buy sex, to buy children. And so if that doesn't stop, it's exhausting. So we have to hold them accountable, and educating the students, like Dr. Cruz just said, that's critical. And I'm glad that HERO exists. And I definitely want to talk more on that. But the teachers need to understand how to identify. The teachers need to be a safe space, and parents even more so.
Mm-hmm.
Parents need to understand what's happening. It's been difficult to get into schools because there's a lot of pushback. We don't want our kids to talk about sex. It's a dirty word. The churches don't want to talk about it, but that's where it's a playground for these pedophiles. And so we have to talk to the parents, the teachers, about how to keep your kids safe in the digital world, how to keep your kids safe online, and not to just take away their phone and ground them and punish them. I can't tell you how many kids become missing children. And I ask the parents, they call me, they're, hey, law enforcement's busy. Can you help me find my kid? Okay, give me their profiles. What you got? Where's their phone? They usually have their phone with them because they grounded them from their phone. They took their phone.
Mm-hmm.
And now we have no way to track the kid. And they're just going to have another phone that's hidden in their mattress from their trafficker. So grounding them from their phone is never the best idea. And there's so many that we still can't find, and we don't know if they'll be returned home. But you can't just take their phone. We need a way to track them. And
Right.
they have to feel safe coming to you saying, hey, somebody hit me up on my DMs and this is what they said. They want my address, Mom. But if they get in trouble, and if they are going to get their hand slapped and they get grounded for talking to someone online, you're not a safe space for them to come to. So we have to be a safe place for kids to say, hey, something doesn't look right. But you also need to educate them on the offense of, this is, when I give you this phone, I'm giving you access to the online world. But that means the online world has access to your kids. So you have to educate them on everything they're going to encounter while having that phone. So you're not coming a month later after they're already texting and in a relationship online with somebody, and then they're getting in trouble. You have to educate them on the front end.
Very interesting. Vicky, what else you got there for us?
Well, I mean, I totally agree with you, Rachel, because again, these children here to learn respect and these values at home. Unfortunately, it doesn't quite happen. I mean, many of these kids are raised by single parents who don't have that time. And so with the HERO, we also talk about on task and watching, and you'll be surprised, like some of the feedback and, what we're getting is that, they feel like they needed those talks, those HERO talks to talk about like how they need to stay on task and get off the phone. Like we need to put our phones aside because we're so distracted, and how they need to do better with respecting themselves and setting boundaries around. And so I think that what you're doing is amazing. I would love to connect with you. If Gilbert, you can send her information
I will
over.
do it. You can
Thank you
count
so
on it.
much. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dr. Vicky. And call in again,
Okay.
please.
I will. Thank you, Gilbert.
You're welcome.
Bye-bye.
I think we have another caller already. Let's see. Who was that there, Miss Producer? Did you say Kim? Kim, are you there? Tim. Tim, what you got for us? Tim, can you hear me?
Hi, Gilbert. How are you?
Are you Kim you're Kim? Kim, what do you got for us?
Hi, it's Kim. Yeah, I have a question for Miss Rachel.
Okay.
Yes, so I was just wondering, what steps do you take to ensure that the agencies you're collaborating with aren't partaking in the trafficking themselves?
It's a good
Wow.
question.
Is that common? That some of these things that you're doing are guilty themselves?
Unfortunately,
I'm going to cry if that's true.
Unfortunately, it's true. You have to vet the organizations. You have to vet the survivors you're working with. You have to vet everyone. Just like law enforcement, I worked with so many officers, and then you find out that there was corruption, and we've got recent cases, and it's heartbreaking because I work with these officers and I'm like, how could you? But it's the same thing with some of the shelters. they're not all safe homes. So you have to really vet them and talk to the survivors who have been through those programs and say what helped, what hurt, and you have to learn from them. And being survivor informed is critical, right? We talk about being trauma informed, but if you don't have a lived experience expert or a survivor who's lived it and gone through these programs, how do you know the program's effective and you have attainable goals without talking to a survivor or somebody who's got experience in it? There's a lot of academic people who are like, oh, I want to fight trafficking and I'm in politics and I'm in this, but do you understand the pain to have purpose in it? Because if you don't, then find a survivor and give them a job, give them an advisory position.
That's a great idea.
Make sure that you know what they're doing. That way you're breaking the cycle of then they get to have income. They get to have a voice back. People want to be a voice for the voiceless, but you have to give them their voice back.
Well, they have no way to really know. I mean, I can talk about it, but I don't really know. I mean, I'm just being real. I'm learning from you, and I have since we've been friends the last couple of years, but really, I don't really know what's out there. And, when I hear people talk about Bissonnette, frankly, I've never really gone to see and talk to someone on the street to say, why are you doing this? And, is it a choice? Is it not a choice? Why can't you just, stop? Why? And I don't really know what the threat is around them with their pimps and those sorts of things. It's got to be terrible.
It's terrible. I've walked the track at Bissonnette. I've gone out there with different organizations. We've handed them out, care packs. I've hung out with the traffickers, with the pimps, with the Johns. We've done reverse John stings. I like to understand the whole model, and I've gone internationally, stateside, and talking to the traffickers. What got you here? Why do you do this? Who hurt you? Right? I like to understand why.
Are there common themes that are common among the traffickers? Were they abused when were they all like, I'm just saying this, were they all abused by their parents or something like that when they were young?
There's definitely abuse and neglect from the victims to the perpetrators. There's this common theme of abuse from the start, and a lot of it's familial. It's what they're culturally born into, and if that's all you know, then that's your normal. I mean, going to different countries, massage parlors and happy endings, you go to Bangkok, for example, and you've got it's like a shopping mall. You've got different rows you've got Asian, American, Indian. You go down a different street and you're provided different girls. Here it's the same way. You've got different flavors, different aisles to shop down. And so when you get to the root of it, of what caused them to want to sell people, well, maybe that's all they've ever known. They come from a different country and they start doing what they know best. That's how you make money. These massage parlors, it's predominantly Asian massage parlors. There's AMP reviews, right? But in their country, it's different. They come here, it's illegal. And so we have to understand cultural norms, and we have to understand disparities and which populations are overly exploited and not cared about as much. And it's just kind of that historical perspective you have to take account. And, people are like, well, I want to save the girls in Katy, but I don't want to save the girls in Bissonnette. We have to look at them as humans. They're individuals that need help, and we have to want to help as a whole and not just the ones that fit the bill of what we want to do.
Very interesting. Well, let's go back to something. And Kim, you jump in if you have another question there. Let's go back to something, which is when you talk about the Johns that are into, I don't know the right term, but I'm just going to say it, child pornography or using, children. Is there something about them that is common amongst them? Because that seems such a bad fetish, if I can use that word. It just seems so unusual, so bad. But am I just missing it? Or is it really much more common than we think?
It's very common. There is a common theme, and it doesn't justify their behavior at all, but there's a common theme in people with pornography. When we go in and you raid the apartment, you find all this child porn, you find little dolls, and it's disgusting, right? But when you talk to them and the mitigation assessments that you as a private investigator, defense attorneys will have me go interview, and I'll talk to the defendant, and they talk about their childhood and how they were hurt and they were raped and sexually abused and locked into, and they have these stories, and it's pretty common that there's this history of child sexual abuse, which makes them now perpetrate. Does it make it right? Absolutely not. But they still need help. Is it fixable? The jury's out on that. I mean, there's a lot of research that's going into, can you fix an addiction to child pornography? And it's very different than just regular pornography. Somebody who wants little children it's a very different psychological process. And you have to take, that's why there's different, child CAC, like there's different divisions for children versus adults. It's a different beast.
And you mean with the law enforcement?
Mm-hmm.
Well, I mean, it would make sense to me because the children are so, number one, they're very innocent. They're not developed. They're just, I don't know, innocence, the first thing that comes to my mind, which is very different. And ultimately, that's what makes it even worse. Because especially if you are I'm just making it up, a clergyman, a coach, where you're in a position of power and authority over these kids. So they look up to you and you gain their trust and then you exploit it.
It's that grooming process.
Is that what it's called? Grooming?
Grooming. And it's very prevalent. And that's how it happens. And when you're a kid, you don't know what's right or wrong. You don't know that the secret game we're playing is actually bad. And so you're excited to hide secrets. And you're 8 years old. You're hiding secrets.
8 years old?
Oh, yeah.
What's the youngest that you know of or that you've worked with? What's the young? I mean, that's dreadful. 8 years old. Come on.
So, I mean, as my main career, I'm a forensic nurse, a sexual assault nurse examiner. So I do the evidence collection kits, the rape kits, as most know of them. But I collect the evidence off the bodies of living victims. And the youngest was 2 months old.
No.
But I'm a pediatric specialist. So I take care of the children who have been raped, exploited, sexually assaulted. And, the human trafficking involves the elements of sexual assault, domestic violence, and trafficking, that money element. So it's all of those crimes. But you see so many different silos with law enforcement, with organizations, therapy groups of, well, we're a domestic violence. Well, we're for anti-trafficking. Well, we're anti-sexual assault. We all need to work together because it's all the same power and control dynamic that's prevalent in domestic violence is also there. The power and control of the trafficker, that they have nowhere to run. It's not, why doesn't she just leave? She can't. They threaten their families. They threaten their other siblings. They threaten to tell their coach. They threaten to show the pictures and the videos of this child porn that's being uploaded daily to their teachers. And then they're afraid they won't graduate. So it's this constant cycle of fear. And that's that force, fraud, and coercion.
Well, the first thing that comes to my mind is, because again, I'm ignorant. I don't know. Is why don't you leave? Why don't you just say, you know what? I'm not going to do it anymore. So don't call me. Change your phone. I mean, but I guess it's much deeper than that. Kim, I want to see. Are you still there, Kim? Do you have another item there you got?
Yeah, Gilbert. I have one more question for Rachel. Okay, so Rachel, is there a way, like when you capture these traffickers, do you guys analyze maybe their brain wavelengths or some sort to see if there was any traumatic damages or any type of neglect or environmental issues they experienced during their childhood that would create such a behavior for them?
Well, that is fascinating. Is there something in the brain that makes it this way? I mean, in other words, could you identify that? That's fascinating.
That's an expensive way.
It's got to be, right?
Yeah. I mean, that's the neurobiology of trauma. There are neurodynamic elements of it. I mean, even with victims, we see, the catecholamine release, and you see all the different stress factors. Right. And so there is that element, and the brain changes, right? Trauma and stress change the brain. And so anybody who's been traumatized is going to be affected. And the pimps or the traffickers that were abused as children, they're going to be damaged in the same way as a victim. They were victims. Just like the hardest cases for me is when I have a 17-year-old girl or a 16-year-old girl, and she's a defendant because she was trafficking a 14 and 13-year-old. I've had so many cases like that, and it's heartbreaking because we're talking to 16, 17-year-old girls, and they're the traffickers. They're the defendants in these cases. But then the 13-year-old or the 12-year-old, in one case, they're like, well, she was my friend, and she took me shopping, and she showed me I wanted to do it. Do these kids know that they wanted to go have sex with 10 men in a hotel before they went back to school the next day? Do you really think they wanted to? Or were they groomed into thinking this was normal and put on drugs to think, oh, I don't have to feel it, and the drugs feel pretty good. And in order for me to get my, they're physiologically addicted now to a substance. In order to get that fixed tomorrow, I got to go do it again. But I'm doing it for my girlfriend, and she's going to help me. So it's the children that are perpetuating this on other kids. Those are the hardest cases, but they're still, so are these 17-year-old traffickers that are cheerleaders at the school and they're pimping out their cheer team? Wow. That happened in Houston. But she's a victim still, right? Because she was victimized her whole life, but now she's doing what she knows best and trafficking other girls. They don't call it trafficking. They just call it, hey, let's hit the game. Let's make some bread. Let's secure the bag. And it's all over Instagram. It's all over social media. It's very, very accepted among high schoolers, among people. They have pimp and hoe Halloween costumes, right? It's glorified. It's glorified in music. And these guys put it all over social media. They put hotel rooms with money all over the bed. The girls are throwing money all over themselves. And you look at them, they're like, well, that's a 14-year-old. What is she doing? But it looks cool. They're going to go on a private jet or go in a Rolls Royce and go down to the River Oaks district and have a nice dinner. To them, it's exciting because it's better than being in one of the wards where they're living in a 1-bedroom apartment with 5 siblings and they get beat every day. So for them, they're like, well, this is a nice life. I get to go stay over in the River Oaks area and it's nice. And I just have to go service some clients for my boyfriend. Wow. It's just, it's so complex. It's very complicated. Kim, thank you for calling in. You got any last words?
I don't. Thank you guys so much. This has been very insightful and disheartening at the same time.
I know. I'm just
with you,
crushed.
Rachel.
Thank you very much, Kim. So going back, do you think, okay, so we have a new DA. And have you seen different approaches by different DAs? And was there anyone doing anything that was like unique, that was good versus the same old, same old? Yeah. So in Harris County in the past few years, they had brought me in as an expert. And now they're starting to bring in experts on these trafficking cases to be able to explain to the jury, who are just members of society, right? They need to understand trafficking. So these cases, we're getting a lot more successful outcomes by showing justice, the truth, and having experts talk about the difference between prostitution and trafficking. And that's made a big difference, bringing in experts and then being able to incorporate the advocates and then these nonprofits, the NGOs, and working together with them. The last DA, Kim Ogg, she did a lot for anti-trafficking organizations. She funded them. She helped them. She realized that there was more to it. Even at the Women's Empowerment Center and defendants who are in jail who are actually victims, she circled around and said, hey, I see you. I want to hear your story. I want to know more. What do y'all need? And she actually had gone to the jail and talked with them. And I think that with the new administration, Sean Tier, he's already shown, signs that he cares. And he's, brought in the right team to say, hey, what do we need for the trafficking division? Even before the election, he had reached out and said, what do we need? What's it going to look like? And he started building out that model of how do we truly help victims? Not what's been done wrong, but what can we do differently and how can we improve? And so his approach to it is good. And I'm really excited to see how that turns out in the coming months. It's the infancy of his term. Right. So I'm excited to see what positive changes are going to happen. And when you think of Houston, I don't know, is it on a scale of 1 to 10, with 10 being the worst and 1 being like the least bad relative to big cities? I mean, where are we? Because there's this seems to be a stereotype when I'm out of town, people saying, oh yeah, Houston's ground zero. Is that true? It's very true. We are the hub. And I always say, we may be the hub because we have the international airport, we have the port, we've got, the proximity to the border. There's a lot of factors that make Houston a hub. But I want us to be the hub for the solution of trafficking. And people do come to us from all over. People in Florida have come to us and said, hey, what are you doing here? How's your model work? We want to do it in the Panhandle. And so we've started these satellite, models all over, but we've done a great job at becoming that model of how do we fight it? How do we collaborate? The healthcare consortium, the law enforcement collaboration, and the nonprofits getting together, the Houston 20, and, working together instead of competing. Then we become the model of all around the country. People look at us, what are we doing? And if we're willing to share our tactics, which we should, if we know that we have a model to fight it that works well, we should be willing to share that with others to be able to help, because these girls will go from the victims, because they're boys too, I have to keep saying that. They'll go from here to New Orleans, they'll go to Detroit, to San Diego, and they'll come back. And it's called the circuit. Any major event, World Cup, Super Bowl, Formula One, they'll take these victims all around to all the major events because that's where the demand is. So they're mobile, they're moving. So we have to have this collaboration with different cities across the United States. Let's hold that thought about big events. I want to come to that. I think it's fascinating. But we have another caller. Is there a Tiffany on?
Yes. Hi. Good morning. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Tiffany.
I was calling because I'm listening and I'm very interested. and what you have going on. And I think it's great, but I feel like it's kind of cliche because you have gentlemen's clubs, and sometimes things kind of start there as well. You have these women in there, they're dancing, they're exploiting themselves, and it's legal to go, but then they kind of get lured sometimes too there. So how do you say it's illegal, but then you make it, okay in one sense? You see?
Yeah, and so recent legislation has addressed that, and we're making waves there. So changing the age to be able to work at a sexually, like a strip club, is now 21. It used to be 18. So even getting that past the SMART Act, that was huge to be able to say 21. Did it change the model? Yeah, they'll just give them different fake IDs. There's a lot of corruption that happens at these strip clubs. And a lot of the victims that I've taken care of, they got groomed to start dancing. And that's how it started, is my boyfriend wants me to dance. It's just going to be a dance. Then there's the champagne room, and then there's the private clients. Then they want you to go back to their suite and entertain their private parties. So it is a perpetual cycle, and it does happen. It's an entryway. And a lot of the victims that are there, they have different names. They have different, titles and stories that they're supposed to tell their customers. So you go for a bachelor party and you're there and you're getting a dance, and she's like, oh, my name is Vicky and I'm from here. And really, that's not her name. That's not where she's from. But she was given a story to tell you, if they even speak English, because a lot of them are brought over and they're trafficked and smuggled in and then forced to work labor and sex. It's an overlap. So that is very prevalent in the gentlemen's clubs, and even the ones that are underground. There's a lot of after hours, and there's a lot of underground, strip clubs. The massage parlors, the same thing. They're brothels, right? They're sexually oriented businesses. And there's more of those than there are Starbucks and McDonald's combined in our city. On. They're everywhere. And the new model now, they're starting, because we're cracking down on strip clubs more, and we're starting to do a lot more stings. And now they're smarter. They're going and they're renting Airbnbs, short-term rentals. They're taking advantage of the infrastructure of these rental companies, renting a house and operating porn shoots, or turning it into a brothel for a week until police get hot on it. Then they move and they rent another short-term rental. And so they're getting smart. We're getting smarter. We're following them. If you touch the internet, you're posting your ads for these girls online, we're going to find you. But it's happening, and they get smarter. As we start cracking down and the city changes and we come after them harder, they just change. And so we have to constantly be educated on the new trends in trafficking and what it looks like.
Well, what about this concept of, if you know, excuse me, that, follow the demand. If you know it's the Super Bowl, or if you know it's the World Cup, does that mean the World Cup's coming here? Does that mean, law enforcement is going to be getting ready? All right, we know they're coming, so now let's do these, stings, or if you know it's coming, why aren't we better prepared?
We are. We're actually actively preparing. I mean, I came to Houston from Detroit originally, but I came down right when the Super Bowl was getting ready to happen. And so I helped them create ads on Backpage at the time and different sites, and I would lure the Johns in. And so I helped them and trained with law enforcement on how to prepare. And then we've taken that model and we help prepare other cities as well. So we are already in motion and getting prepared and getting these ads ready. And Street Grace, the organization that I mentioned before, they have that transaction intercept Gracie. And so they use that and they give it to law enforcement for free. It's a free tool. It's the biggest one. It just launched last month. So it's a big tool for them to intercept and to go on and post these ads to intercept the sex buyers. And the numbers are staggering. It's insane how much traction they've gotten, even in the recent events and the upcoming. It's going to be a game changer, because we're coming at them online where they are, and we're targeting them through technology.
Wow. Well, what if I'm going to take, just for argument's sake, the other side. Why, if you look at, say, Amsterdam, are we better off to just go the other way and say, okay, we cannot stop it? It's kind of like prohibition, and now we're making alcohol legal. And so therefore now we're taxing it and controlling it and so forth. So let's say in Amsterdam, they're making it legal. So then you're testing the girls, or doing these things, so, getting away from the physical violence, or at least you're hoping to. is that a model that's worth looking at, or is it just the same old, same old?
That's a whole lecture all in itself. The legalization versus decriminalization,
Yes.
partial decrim, the Nordic model. I've been to Amsterdam several times. When the documentary I was in, Surviving Sex Trafficking, we went to Budapest. We went to different countries. But that legalization model, it doesn't protect the girls. It puts regulations and it makes it more unsafe. I'm very pro partial decrim. I've seen it from both. I've talked to the survivors. I've talked to people who are actively in the sex industry, and I've got friends who are still in it, and I love them where they're at, but they have to be ready. They have to have next steps. If I leave this industry, what else are you going to give me as a job? I'm a felon. I took charges for my trafficker 10 years ago, and now I can't get a job. I've got HIV. What am I going to do? That's their mindset. So if you don't have systems in place to get them out and to give them another option, legalization is not the answer.
Yeah,
There's
stuck.
a whole debate on that. But just from talking to people in those countries, in our country, that's a whole discussion, but that's not the answer. Decriminalizing it partially and holding the buyers accountable and not holding the girls who are being forced or coerced into this life, not just arrest. You can't arrest your way out of the problem, and you can't prosecute your way out of the problem. You have to come up with solutions of what does it look like so that this isn't an option for them anymore, to put a dollar sign on the human body and to make money off of it. How do we change that?
Wow, it is so complicated. Hold that thought. We have another caller. Who was that? Is there Julia? Julia, is there a Julia there?
Yes.
Julia, you have me a tip for me, Talk Inspiration and Prayer with Miss Rachel Fischer, who is an expert on sex trafficking.
Hi, I was just wondering, like in these lower income neighborhoods where, children are more targeted, are there any like community programs to kind of help them know what to look out for and what not to do or who to stay away from?
Very interesting. Is there like I'm making it up, YWCA or YMCA or Women's Center or something? Is there something like that that's there in the community to educate young people?
There are several, and I don't work for one organization particularly. I advise and consult for a variety of them, and there are so many anti-trafficking organizations. It's exciting and it's refreshing. The problem is funding. They lack funding. They go out there, they educate in schools, they go out in the neighborhoods and go out to different areas, and it's there. But it's strongly underfunded, and it's sad because we'll give to animal shelters, but you don't want to help little girls.
Isn't that ironic? Yeah, isn't that strange?
Sad. It's sad.
I mean, look, I love animals, but humans first, I guess. I don't know, but it just seems to me it's everywhere. It's everywhere. But Julia, what say you there?
Yeah, I was just wondering that, like, I guess, people in these areas and they don't know about these programs. So I'm just kind of wondering, like, to tell them.
Well, one thing that gets me is the stereotype of a movie like Pretty Women, Pretty Woman. I mean, that's a fairy tale, right? I mean, this concept of, I'll just go and then I'll meet my dream and he's going to be a rich person and he's going to take care of me and he's going to be wonderful and I'll be out of the life. I mean, how many times does that happen?
Every day in Houston.
No, when it's successful, they all think it's going to be successful.
It's successful for years at a time. I mean, we see that in Houston, the whole sugar baby, sugar daddy situation, and the married men and the young girls. And when it's an adult and it's an 18-year-old, 19-year-old, if that's the choice she's making, what options did she have? And if she only had one option, did she have a choice? So
and you're really not a mature adult at 18 or 19. I mean, maybe by the law you are, but come on, you're really not an adult.
They don't understand what decisions they're making. And I mean, your brain is still developing. And if you're in a situation of poverty, and because we see that more, the disproportionate, I mean, yes, it happens to girls with blonde hair, but it happens to, the Black community. It's so prevalent, and people, there is this stigma. They look at those, they're like, oh, that's over in 4th Ward or 3rd Ward, or we don't want to go outside the loop and we don't want to help them. We'll help the girls in Sugar Land and Katy, but we don't want to help them. They want to be there. Really? Have you ever walked the track? Have you lived it? We have to take that bias out. If we want to help the problem, we have to go to those neighborhoods and say, hey, what do you want? What is it going to take? Talk to us. Tell us what you need, instead of us saying, oh, it works over here for us. We're going to.
It's very interesting that when you think about race and the role of race, it's in this business also.
Yes.
It's hard to believe. We got another caller. Was there a Derek? Is there a Derek there?
Yes, Gilbert. How are you?
I'm well, Mr. Derek. You got me and Rachel Fischer. What do you got for us today?
Well, I want to say to Rachel, you know, I think that the term expert needs to be changed, because most of the so-called expert in those fields, some of them have never experienced what you have experienced. I mean, the true experts are those who suffered it. The human beings, and I can say this, the human beings are lower than zero. Animals don't do the type of things that we do to one another. And that's all I call to say.
Well, that's an interesting thing when you think about the animal kingdom and how they behave. And, you know, it is very interesting.
And Derek, as a man, I appreciate that voice, because men are predominantly the ones who are, you know, buying sex and have abused us, right? And so as a survivor, sometimes our voice gets ignored because like, oh, you're a victim. We don't want to disturb you. But it's so empowering for me to turn my pain into power and purpose, to be able to help others who don't have their voice yet. And so to listen to survivors and to have that lived experience expertise is huge. And I had to, you know, fight for survivors that go speak at galas or to go share their story, for organizations to pay them. They re-exploit them by saying, hey, come, it's like trauma porn. Come tell this whole city what you went through. We're not going to pay you for it, but we want to hear about it. And then they don't do anything to help them. And then they re-exploit them. And the recidivism rate is about 7 out of 10 times that you end up going back to the life, because you have no options. You're judged, you're looked down upon. So to be, you know, respected as an individual, that, you know, you see me, and, you know, it's like going through years of college and learning the life, learning the ins and outs. And it's hard to talk about. It's hard to I travel around the world training law enforcement, training FBI agents, training school teachers, healthcare, on how to do better. And it's exciting to see that people want to learn and that they actually want to listen.
Well, let me ask you something. This is going to be maybe too personal. If it is, I apologize. How did you get out? I mean, what is it about you? There's something about you. And how do we identify that in others? Because I look at you and you look like a lawyer. You look like you just are, you know, like you're, I mean, really, I mean that in a loving way, but I really mean it. You know, how did you get out?
So my faith has been my everything, right? And everybody's got their faith. Mine is in God. And knowing that there was a higher purpose, and him seeing me in my hurting. And I was in the foster care system, right? So my story is very complex, but I got out. I ended up graduating high school. I got married at 19 years old to somebody I met online, you know, another biker, because my father was a biker. My mom was in prison my whole life. So I married somebody who promised me a better life to get me away from my traffickers. And I moved from 8 Mile to 32 Mile Road in Michigan, right? And so I started over, and that was a really bad domestic violence, bad situation, but I at least was able to allowed to go to nursing school during that time. And going to nursing school, I heard about sexual assault. And I was like, wait, what happened to me as a kid wasn't normal. Wait, there's a word for that. It's called trafficking. I just thought I was, you know, hiding this secret life from my church. And I got kicked out of my church because somebody's husband found an ad of me online. And they're like, oh, we saw you online. You can't come to youth group anymore. We can't have you. You're a bad influence. And I'm like, wait a second. Looking back now that I know what it is, why didn't anyone ever say, hey, why is your husband looking for little girls online?
Yeah. And why wouldn't they have said, you know, Jesus would have brought her in rather than kick her out, would have brought her in to say, how can we help you?
Jesus would have been the best criminal defense attorney, because the woman at the well, like, he loved those who were unlovable. We as society look down on prostitutes. And I hate that word, right? Like, my mom was in prison my whole life for being a prostitute. And until I realized what trafficking was, I was like, oh my gosh, you were prostituted. You were a victim.
She was a victim.
Yeah. And I didn't realize I hated her for so long because I thought I was just abandoned. But I had to learn it and then see that I fell into that same cycle and I got out. But my faith is what sustained me. And God's the only thing that really brought me out, showing me that I can use my pain for purpose.
Is your mom with us?
No, she just died a year ago.
I see. Did you ever, did she get out?
She got out of prison and she overdosed on fentanyl, and she ended up getting out of prison and going back to running the streets. And so when she went, I had to go to Florida and I had to go to the track and all her drug dealers and tell all the girls. She was the madam. And so she was running the show. That's all she knew, though. Since she was 14 until she was in her 60s, she was still out there working the game. And so I had to go to all the trailer parks and go out to the street corners and tell them, hey, Mama Tia's gone. She's not coming back. But let me give you some resources.
Did you reconcile with her?
I did. On her deathbed, I was able to, say my last words. But
good for you. You have been an inspiration to so many. I'm going to say a very quick prayer. I don't think I have time for the prayer. I really don't have time for the prayer. I will do it at the next show. And we have a council member, Mario Castillo, coming on next week. And I will do my prayer for victims because I want to give you the last word. It's hard to believe an hour has gone by. That's Houston right there at that camera. And I mean it when I say this. You are an inspiration to me. And I think you're an inspiration to so many. And for all it's overwhelming, one step forward, two step back. Boy, we thank God for what you do. And we hope you continue and you find that strength to continue to help more people and touch more people. So you have the last word.
The last word is, Houston, it's not if you see something, say something. If you see something, do something. Now that you know, what are you going to do about it? How can you impact in your circle and your community to make a difference?
If you see something, do something. You heard it here first, Houston. This is Gilbert Garcia, tip for me, saying we'll see you next time.
This is Gilbert Andrew Garcia. Listen to my radio show, A Tip from Gilbert. Talk, inspiration, and prayer every Monday from 11 a.m. till noon on Houston WWJ 1360 AM and streaming live on kwwj.org. Listen on the legendary KYOK 1140 AM and streaming live on kyokradio.org. KCOH 1380 AM on Sand Geek Radio 95.1 FM 1460 AM and Aliento Radio 101.7 FM and 1540 AM. Call in at 832-570-8075 and follow me on social media. See you then.